Welcome to K2's Personally Speaking podcast, a series that shines a light inside a highly successful global mobility organization, with human centricity at the heart of everything. Each episode takes a look inside K2 and toward the people behind the business, the brand, and the success of the Because It's Personal ethos. Global Marketing Director James Marshall is joined on each episode by colleagues from around the globe to discuss their roles, their background, special projects, and to find out what they bring to deliver a truly unique service to clients, relocating families, and business service partners.
Hello and welcome. I've got Kim Thomas joining me today from our Sydney office. She is this is a tongue twister, Head of Strategic Alliances and Client Development, APAC. How you doing?
Hi, James. Well, how are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. So, for those keen-eared individuals that are listening to this podcast or watching it, we'll work out throughout this podcast that you're not, in fact, Australian at all. You moved there a while ago, which we'll come on to in a minute. But you've joined us from the Sydney office. You've been with us about a year now?
Correct.
Right?
That's fine.
And actually, you've come in to see us today, so we could talk a little bit about your role and a little bit about the region and stuff like that. But you've been over doing a bit of a holiday break. Been doing some skiing and stuff like that. Skiing or snowboarding?
Skiing, yes.
Ever done snowboarding?
Oh, a long time ago.
Yeah.
But yes.
It's too slow.
You got to stick with the things that you are better at.
When you get to our age, you got to stick with the stuff you know, right?
Yes.
Broken bones take longer to heal. So I was reading on your, as part of my research, I always look at the person I'm going to talk to about LinkedIn profile and stuff. You and I have spoken a lot actually on Teams in the last 12 months.
I feel like I've seen you many times.
I know, right? We're just differing backgrounds.
This is our first face-to-face.
In real life. IRL, I think the kids will say. You've been with us a year, but I believe through some research, not on LinkedIn, obviously it would be a bit weird if I found this out on LinkedIn, that you met Nick and Rich like 20 years ago?
We were in our youth.
So a lot happens in 20 years.
Yes.
And that's what we're going to talk about on this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Not the last 20 years, don't worry. We'll be here for a very long time. You'll miss your flight home. It'll be disastrous. The kids will hate mum and all of that sort of stuff. But in that time, you relocated so you're in Sydney. Is that where you relocated to when you left the UK and you went straight to Australia? Yeah. So always been in Sydney.
2009 into Sydney.
Tell us a story. You met Nick and Rich in the UK?
Yes, I had to get as far away from them.
Yeah, right. Oh, you got there before I got there. So you met Nick and Rich in the UK. What was your capacity? Why did you meet them? What were you doing at that point in time?
Yes, so I was at EY, managing client global mobility moves and cases, clients, and Nick and Richard had a mutual client. We had a mutual client. So it was around about 2006, 2007. So we were both effectively servicing this client.
Okay.
And I think Richard reminded me, there are a few ways.
I'll tread carefully here.
I know yes. He reminded me of a few things last night when we had a lovely dinner together. And I reminded him of a few things. 20 years, lots goes on. Anyway, and so we had a great mutual client together. And we worked closely. Nick sort of owned that account that we were looking after at the time. Nick was very good at connecting us really nicely, actually.
He continues to do that, I think.
Yes, he does. He does. A very personal connection. And so he'd come and see us face to face as frequently as possible. He was, formally contract, et cetera, with the client, but kept very connected with us because mutually we were working.
Well, I guess there was a mutually beneficial gain for the client that if you guys knew what each other were doing as
we
well.
worked well together.
Yeah,
cool. That was an awful long time ago.
So fast forward, how did your own relocation? Yes. How did that come about?
My husband and I had been standard travellers in Sydney.
Okay.
Lived and worked in Sydney for a period of time, and as we left, we might have a bit of a tear in our eye, and I think it was a very easy decision to.
It was like one day we'll be back.
Yes, yeah. And kind of cemented in now. Otherwise, life carries on, and you don't do it. And so we did. The irony is that we got a relocation at my husband's firm.
Okay, and how did that go?
It went smoothly. It was just us.
You
It
have
was
to say
easy.
that.
We knew where we were going. It was just us and 10 boxes or something. So it was very straightforward. I did get that emotional. In fact, talking more around empathy that you can have for assignees and things. I very much thought, I know where I'm going. I've lived here before. This will be fine. And actually, when we arrived there, I did have that emotional roller coaster.
It's a bit different, I guess, when you go,
The reality.
I'm here to live. I'm not backpacking, vacationing, whatever it is. I'm actually here to set roots.
No one at all. And, family were a long way away, et cetera, et cetera. So,
And I always think, like, I've never relocated myself, but I always wonder, like when you first relocate and you go, that's the area I want to live in or whatever, and you say, like, you move house and you're like, but where is the doctor's surgery? When is bin day? Like all of these things, these unknown things. Do you go through, does that all compound the emotional, at home we knew where this stuff was and what was happening? And
yes, I think probably the older you get and the more kind of, if you've got kids and, there are certainly very different criteria that different people and families will have to consider as their priorities. I will say the two of us young, we didn't have too much that we needed to consider very seriously. My husband had the security of a job. I then ended up being re-employed by EY. They won a client. Ironically, then relocated me from Sydney down to Melbourne.
Oh,
I
okay.
spent my first period of time being relocated again, commuting on weekends. But once I had that security of going back into a role, I thought, great, okay, the code's all a little bit more familiar and things. But to begin with, it was my husband. So I ended up connecting with his work colleagues, making friends with his work colleagues.
Sure.
And, I think as soon as you start laying some foundations of friendships, as soon as you get your bearings
everything
around the
gets a bit
city.
easier.
So
And then you start getting the benefit of why you wanted to go back to
yes.
Australia, right?
But you still do have that emotional roller coaster, despite, like I said, we made the decision. So I can imagine, often when families are relocated, there is one party who's slightly more invested. A, do they have the role? Or B, do they have a family connection as to why they're relocating? And, if you are going as a couple or as a family, there probably is going to be one family member that takes slightly more challenging for them than other family members. And so I think you need to remember that as well.
Yeah.
But anyway, it didn't take long.
And of course that,
Settled.
when you talk about that, that's I've never really thought about that, but I guess it's a reasonably logical point that, and actually that person may not be the employee, they may be the spouse. And that can be quite an emotional drain on all parties involved in that relocation.
Yes, which is why spousal support can be very critical in the success of the assignment. It's why something like a school search is so critical. If your children don't get into the school that you wanted them to, or your expectations aren't set correctly as to how school years work or how the dynamic of a school works or something like that. I mean, let's be honest, that's often the critical component of somebody being able to settle well, have the children settled well. Is the job going well?
Now, your kids are all born in Australia.
They are.
So no settlement or anything like that. They love life there. It must be really fascinating for you, though, as mum, having grown up in the UK. So with the knowledge of, as a child going through like the education system in the UK and stuff like that, and maybe, thinking, I wonder what it would have been like if my kids were in the UK education system. Is it different? Vastly, or?
Well, I've got a couple of nieces who are doing GCSEs at the moment, and we were talking, they're saying, oh, what's it called? What the GCSEs called in Australia? And I said, oh, they don't have any, actually.
And nieces are like, when can we move?
Yes.
I don't have to do GCSEs. Do they do A-levels?
They do the equivalent of A-levels.
Okay. HIOS, is it called?
HSC, yeah.
Okay.
Or the International Baccalaureate. So yes, it's an education process on our behalf. My husband duly delegated that role to me, which was absolutely fine.
Tag, you're it.
Yes. But, I've had time to prepare.
Yeah.
And unlike other assignees who might move when their children are at critical schooling
they're in
ages.
the moment.
Yes, I had time to prepare and think about it and research and ask the community people that I was around. So that's the difference with me.
Yeah.
Whereas assignees that, need to rely on the internet for a source or hopefully someone
Nice,
a little
some
more
support.
specialised.
So you've been in Australia 16 years?
That's
don't you?
right, yes, just ticked over.
Fantastic. So 20 years ago, you met Nick and Rich.
Yes.
Been with us a year. What happened? 19 years. How did you end up back at K2?
So Nick had kept in touch. I also worked with Rob McFarland a long time ago. I worked with multiple other team members.
I think everyone's worked with Robert Varland.
Multiple other team members from my past organisations work here at K2. And so I always felt nicely connected. And the role came around, Richard's popped over, and I had a conversation with him. And I think it would always sort of popped over just to have a continued personal connection, I guess. I did get on with them both very well when we were youngsters, so it was just a personal connection. Richard came over, and to be honest, I was quite outstanded by the progress of K2, some of the initiatives of K2. And I'm not just saying this because I actually went just thinking, we're just going to have a coffee catch up. And
Yeah, sure.
Richard couldn't help himself. I said, look at this. And he was showing me things that had been done. And superb things like the Nepal trip, like K2's commitment to sustainability and some of the sustainability initiatives, the partnership with the University of Bath. And, I'm not just saying all of these things to get them on the podcast. I did genuinely think, it
does make a difference to people.
It really, yes. I thought, oh gosh, how are you doing this? And so I had to say, how big is the organisation? It's changed a little in the last 20 years, and I've seen the progress, but I think a large portion of the growth has happened in the last couple of years, or last sort of 3, 4, 5 years. And to really hear that, and to hear Richard's continued passion, I thought he was going to tell me all about his new pending New Zealand trip and whatever, and he couldn't help but just wax lyrical about, it is a very genuine, authentic, this is the really cool things that we're doing, Kim. And I thought, that's great. And so we just kept in touch. Very long story short, but, multiple conversations across the way, sort of thinking, is there true mutual benefit for both of us? Which was, again, it's a really lovely way of thinking about things. He was genuinely thinking, how will you fit within the organisation, and ditto. I want to bring some benefit. So anyway, like I said,
1 year on, the answer is yes.
Yes, here I am.
Yeah.
It worked.
So the APAC region I find myself, I've got on my notes here, APAC region is a growth region for K2, and when I write that, I kind of think, so's America's and so's Europe, but APAC's growth and your role with regard to client development, what does that look like for you day to day when you're thinking about, I'm in a region that we are expanding in, we're seeing some growth. We've got some really exciting stuff happening in the region first half of this year. We've opened a new office in Sydney, all of that sort of stuff. What does your role within that K2 way of doing things, all of that cool stuff that you just said with regard to the work we do for Foundation, all of the sustainability, amazing sustainability work that's done by the business, the understanding that it should be done, needs to be done, and we're in a great position to be able to do something. And also the really cool way in which we approach our service delivery. And we talk about, we're a great place to work, we've got a net promoter score of 80, world-class customer service, all of that sort of stuff. How do you take all of that stuff, there's so much, and like disseminate it and in your role of sort of an ambassador for K2 in the region? And because we're not huge in Australia at the moment. In fact, let's go back one question. Before you joined K2, you were obviously aware of K2 because of your relationship with Nick and Rich and previous sort of work with them. Was K2 really known in region, in Australia in particular?
So I would say as you well know, we have some superb clients. We really do. And a huge variety and a diverse range of clients. And the K2 Australia office service those clients superbly. We've had some team members who are coming up to 10 years with K2. So well established, really, know the K2 way through and through. It's a lovely team that I've really enjoyed joining.
Yeah.
So first off, acknowledging the team have been there for a substantial period of time, but a lot of the work that the team and a lot of the clients that the team are working with are clients that might have their global mobility team decision makers based here in the UK. So
Right.
naturally, the UK teams are, perhaps working slightly closer with those clients.
A bit more involved.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So our team are supporting the assignees and their families coming into and out of the region, and doing a superb job. So I think talking to I would say first of all, my role and how I see my role is really to think about how can we improve the experience in our region, and it has knock-on impacts in the global region. Across the global business, how can we improve the experience for our assignees, their families, and our mobility teams, and the clients that we're working with? So that's where I guess the strategic alliance piece comes in. Who can we partner with as an organization so that clients have a broader breadth of service, perhaps?
Yep. Greater choice.
Yes, yes, and to just do things slightly smoother. I mean, we feel like we do things really smooth, but we've got to continue to look for change and progress and development.
Yeah.
And so that's where I see a large proportion of that role going. And then so just naturally, I need to know the clients. What is it that they're looking for? How can we improve things for them? Who would be some good partners with us in the region? And so I feel like that's a large scope of my role, and really what I'm focusing on. And all the softer, we can only do a good role and we can only be good at our job and give a good customer experience if we know our customers exceptionally well.
Yeah.
So it's just taking the time to get to know everybody. I think I very naively assumed from my history, and I have worked with a diverse range of clients, but you often think that you don't become brainwashed, but you also often think, my latest and greatest client or company that I was working for, that's how everyone does everything.
Does it? Yeah.
And
That's
it
the
just
norm.
is not true.
Yeah.
There's so much variety out there, and people might think, everyone's very concerned on budget at this time. Well, yes, of course, there are budget concerns, but also people are very concerned about assignee experience, customer experience, et cetera, et cetera. So really, I'm trying to work to get to know everybody, and then understand how key services that K2 offer are of interest to them. And if that will help them, every global mobility team and a client wants the absolute best for their assignees. So I'm just trying to understand, are you currently getting the best?
And do you think that trend-wise, the last podcast we did, we had Eric in your seat and we talked about technology and the trends around technology and how that's enhancing mobility and experience and stuff like that. You mentioned two things, for example, an assumption that one thing that guides decision-making may be the economics of relocation. But are you seeing that the other really important point of experience is becoming more prevalent in mobility in general, in the region? How do you see that now, the last maybe 5 years and 5 years ahead?
I think customer experience and client experience, the assignee experience is just, you're right, probably evolving, and organizations are more aware. I think during the blip of our recent history, I think senior leaders have become more aware around the importance of employees, their well-being, their happiness, And that has sort of heightened one of the positives of the last couple of years. And so as a consequence, and I would also say actually through that period of time, the complexity of global mobility was probably highlighted as well. So I think...
In what way?
So during COVID, when employees relocated...
Sorry, that's not a banned word.
I know.
But you just feel like, so we're in 25 now, guys.
So during that period when, certain employees may have relocated themselves, and then we ended up with, the complexities of where are they, who are they with, have they got the correct immigration
Visa
compliant
status,
corporate
tax, sure.
Are we considering everything? And so I think all of those complexities, I'll just touch on it very briefly, but, that heightened the awareness of the criticality of relocating and the key things that are non-negotiables, like immigration,
getting
like
those bits
corporate
right.
tax
Yeah,
consideration.
sure.
You cannot get those wrong, or they have severe consequences. So that's just highlighted things, and I think that's across the board globally. So then, when you are thinking about formally relocating your employees, and how the mutual benefit for relocating your employees will evolve, it needs to be perfectly established and well set up for the family for it to be a success, and the role needs to be enjoyable, and the right person needs to be in that role for them to be a success for the business. So I think that's where I see the customer experience, the employee experience has really been elevated over the last couple of years because global mobility has come to the forefront a little bit more, remote work policies, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what I am excited about. You have to look at the positives of things in the last few years, and that's where I think that the importance of that has really been elevated. And so you're right, you talk about that when Eric was talking about technology and things like that. Yes, important, but we are as an organization always going to continue to focus on the personal element.
Yeah, the human.
That's where we think
absolutely.
that benefit will come from, and that won't transition over time. So no nuanced, changes. There are immigration changes in different countries all the time that are keeping us on our toes, and there are slight changes, in every global mobility policy, the way that things do things, but ultimately what's not changing is the fact that customers need to be moved seamlessly, and we think that the best way to do that is through our personal experience.
And in the APAC, I agree, by the way, in the APAC region, are you seeing, is there trends? Is there an increase of people coming into the region, moving around the region, out of the region? Are you seeing any differences, or is it kind of still business, ignoring COVID? Is it kind of just, it's business as usual? There's a steady influx, outflux, internal?
No, definitely net inbound immigration, certainly increasing. There are various government policies that are encouraging that. House prices demonstrate that, supply and demand. And like many other countries, we need certain bulk of people experience for particular roles. So yes, there is a net increase. I wouldn't particularly say that's, I think there are plenty of other regions globally as well where immigration is also increasing, and the number of assignees coming in is changing. I think it's fluid. And then, as I said, so far as what are other sort of changes in the region, I think we're very similar to lots of other regions. There are housing crises, the cost of living, all those considerations that are very critical for assignees to think about before they even step foot on that plane. And, Australia is experiencing all of that, as are many other locations.
So how does then, what I'm keen to sort of understand is we often, as outbound communication from K2, we were always talking about human centricity and experience and How does the experience of the individuals on the ground, so our relo managers and so on and so forth, how does how does that help an assignee? When we talk about experience in human centricity, but we've got an assignee that's moving into a region where house prices are higher than expected, or schooling places are fewer than expected, all of that sort of stuff. How do we apply all of our skills to still make that a positive experience?
I would say, first up, like myself, like I've bored you all with earlier in the podcast, I relocated over to Sydney, and so have many our relocation managers as well. They have completed a move themselves, so they've got that genuine empathy and understanding. I think our relocation managers, although we've got what we call one voice, which is the consistency of our messaging globally, which is superb, I think our relocation managers are also really encouraged, and would naturally do this with their experience in the role, to stay attuned to the assignee and their family. You can't operate all within this one square box. Assignees want to operate differently. Do they like to have email communication? Do they want you to pick up the phone? In certain regions, we use different forms of communication. So keeping abreast of how the assignee and their family want you to best work with them. Does the assignee really want to know everything up front so that they can plan and prepare? Or is that going to scare the bejesus out of them?
Yeah, sure.
And do they need bite-sized chunks? So we've got a consistent model with flexibility within it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really, I hear the team, I see them understand, and that is where they work really nicely with a huge variety of assignees. And as you know, we really do have a huge variety of assignees, a huge variety of clients, a huge variety of policies, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And it is all around listening, understanding.
And I guess knowing facts, knowing the information, and then be reassuring with how you disseminate that information and constant flow of knowledge.
Well, that's what we're really good at doing as well, is keeping everybody up to date all the time, so that no assignee is asking for something in a reactive way. We're proactively providing the information, and so that people are kept abreast. Is your shipping being delayed? Is there an issue with your home temporary accommodation, which means that you can't move in for an extra day? There is. Okay, but we've resolved this already by you've got an extra night in your hotel, whatever it might be.
Yeah, sure.
They're very proactive because, again, lots of them have lived and breathed the experience themselves. But also, we're a very well-connected global organization, which is really hard to achieve. And so, as I said, that consistency of communication, the consistency of how we want the K2 way to work flows through for everybody, so that they do understand, okay, well, these are how the assignee is going to be made to feel the most comfortable and the smoothest experience.
So next 12 months, 2025, what does that look like for you? You said your son's starting high school.
That's right.
That's a big deal.
It is. Yes.
So at home, there's some changes. What about at work?
Yes. So I think continue to do what I've been doing, really. Continue having conversations with various people to understand their businesses, and a bit of travel over to the Singapore team. The Singapore
nice.
team are great. So seeing them, connecting in with colleagues and other customers and clients in Singapore as well, and wherever else the region may take us. We've also got a couple of events that are in the planning stage as well, that we know that we really want to do. And again, harping back to my 20 years ago, what worked really well with Nick and Richard, it's that in-person connection. Mm-hmm. So it's ideally getting, a number of people in the room, building the confidence for everybody to feel comfortable with each other, to share experiences, to get mutual advice, or to receive updates from us around immigration, for us to work with some of our other partners to receive other technical updates or compliance updates, to continue to talk about the great things that we're achieving with sustainability, to continue to talk about our bespoke program, whatever it might be that I think. And bespoke program actually is a very interesting one, and one that we hope to move on in our region as well, because it does seem like it's a very sought after.
We're doing some very cool stuff this year, kicking off with bespoke, which we're really excited to hopefully launch under Q1, which I think will we talk about it going alone again, really communicating the value of that service, and being able to disseminate the difference between your levels, your audience within a mobility program. That's the first part of I think 6 really cool things we're hoping to deliver throughout 2025 into 2026. So hopefully all of that will help you with your ongoing support of partners and clients and colleagues alike as well, right? Across the region.
Exactly. Oh, we're not standing still.
No, never. Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you, Kim. Safe travels back. Good luck to your son when he joins high school in a few weeks' time.
Lovely, thank you.
Hopefully they get some sleep on the flight home.
Good Lord.
But let's see.
Just want to, well, if I sleep for the whole journey, then I won't.
It doesn't matter. Exactly. And then you'll have the energy to deal with them not sleeping when you get home. Brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks, James.
Super.
Appreciate it.
Well done. Cool.
Cheers.